Auburn is in prime position to land some talented offensive linemen.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. We are dapping it up with the Darrell Dapprich, Montgomery radio legend on this Friday edition of the show. I was asked by our national college football host here at Locked On about Eric Singleton, that conversation later in the show. And of course, Auburn takes on Georgia in basketball tomorrow. Darrell will preview that game as well. But Auburn's set to host a ton of offensive linemen over the next few months, which is obviously exciting. We talk about the emphasis that this coaching staff made at this position group early, and now all of a sudden there's a ton of depth, but you can now see like the path to playing time and stacking classes. So the guy I want to start with, Darius Gray, he's a 5-star on the 247 composite. He's a 4-star some places, but a guy that will be on Auburn's campus from Richmond, Virginia, an interior offensive lineman, Darius Gray. I like what this kid has on tape.
He would be obviously the highest rated offensive lineman if Auburn was to get him in this upcoming class. He's the crown jewel, the one that Auburn wants. I love how Auburn's broadening its – not only are they going after offensive linemen in significant quantities, they are going – all across the country. And we'll talk about that more later, but they're not being confined to a particular region. This kid, it's 6'3", 285 interior offensive lineman. Obviously, will probably have to put some weight on, but man, he's got all the big schools coming after him and would definitely be, he's very, very highly ranked. As you mentioned, 5-star in most places. It's just one of those guys you covet as an offensive lineman that I think, Zach, the teams that consistently were the top of the league and the SEC and other conferences always got one or two of these kids every year, at least one or two every year. And Auburn needs to get in that habit. It's a good habit to have a lot of these guys on campus. It's a great trend to be signing a lot of offensive linemen, but you do need that 5-star occasionally to get in that class.
Yeah, no question. And so he's the number 2 interior offensive lineman in the class, according to 247. I believe. His official visits look to be Tennessee, Auburn, LSU, Penn State, and South Carolina. His official visit date for Auburn appears to be June 10th. A lot of folks kind of saying, hey, South Carolina might be the early lean, but with all these official visits, I'm never going to count this coaching staff out.
No, I mean, there were a lot of people that came into Big Cat Weekend last year that were official leans other places and left with their commitment. And looking back on it, I believe Auburn batted 1,000 with the guys that committed that historic weekend and ended up putting pen to paper.
Right.
So yeah, this once you get a kid on campus, his coaching staffs they're closers, man.
Yep. So Darius Gray, the 5-star number 2 interior offensive lineman in the country, set to visit Auburn in early June. Dominic Harris, a kid from Las Vegas, Nevada, Clark High School, 3-star, which I think some Auburn fans look at that as like, oh, come on, we're only taking 4 and 5 stars now. But this is a guy that, once again, like when you look at offensive lines throughout the country, has all the offers from the schools around them, in that part of the country. Your Utahs, your Arizonas, Arizona State, Washington. Washington played for a national championship 2 years ago. Arizona State was in the college football playoff last year. Dominic Harris, 6'7", 335 pounds.
It's a big boy. That's a significantly big boy to have that. Sure. That someone at 6'7" is going to have a nice long radius too, long arm reach. So again, I love the footprint here that Auburn's going all the way out to Las Vegas. Clark High School, which is a big high school, has, pretty good, nice football tradition to go get a kid. I mean, I don't remember, because there was very little offensive line recruiting in years past anyway, never mind going across the country to get one. But this footprint that they've broadened out to get kids in the Northeast, to get some kids out West, it's a really great strategy. And I think what happens is you start to go into different places and look at kids that are coveted in other parts of the country, you're going to hit on a lot of these guys. It's a numbers game.
Yeah. So his official visits: Washington, Arizona, Utah, and Auburn will be the first of the 4 official visits that he has set. Another one, and this name may sound familiar because his brother played here, but Wilson Zaire, he's a kid from Georgia. Of course, his brother Killian Zaire played for the Auburn Tigers, and he's unranked so far, at least on 247. So you got to think that his rating will shoot up once he's starting to get ranked by some of these publications. But got offers from Auburn and Alabama, and then some smaller schools. So kind of interesting recruitment early on for Wilson Zaire, but it looks like he will be visiting the Tigers soon.
Is that the kid that also got an offer from Michigan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Alabama, Michigan, Auburn. Yeah, those seem to be
the reason why I say that, and I don't want it to sound stereotypical, but Big Ten schools really do a really good job, especially like the Michigans and the Ohio States and the Iowas, of getting good offensive tackles. I mean, good offensive linemen. They do a good job recruiting those kids. So if it's a kid that Michigan wants and thinks it can play on their offensive line, I think that's a really good indication for Auburn as well.
Yeah. So he will be on Auburn's campus May 30th. And then the last guy that I think is worth mentioning, Dalton Toothman, 6'5", 295. He's from Ocean Springs, Mississippi, but he's put together a nice list as well, but he plans to visit the Tigers. 3-star guy, but he has offers from Florida, LSU, and Florida State, and of course, Auburn as well.
We've said it to her blue in the face. It's about the offers a lot of times. I look and see if a particular school wants them that's tradition rich along the offensive line. I really don't care if it's a 3-star or a 4-star. That means if they feel like they can play for them, they can play for Auburn. So, again, with a name like Toothman, though, football doesn't work out, Zach. You know what I'm going to say, right?
You got to be a dentist?
He can be a dentist. He could go to dentistry school. I mean, it's there. Right. It's there to fall back on. So,
yeah, you got to trust him with his last name. So,
yeah.
So I mean, this 2026 class is off to a hot start, but it has kind of been a little bit of a dry period, and we're about to see a lot of visits really pick up. And they've got a lot of really good defensive players. You got to love the wide receivers that are already in this class. Need more guys in the trenches, and this is kind of the next wave of that if Hugh Freeze wants to stack another elite class on top of the previous 2.
We know that it's always a numbers game with Hugh Freeze. We've talked about how many offensive linemen he wants on his roster. So, anticipating a lot of guys will be leaving after 2025 because, fortunately, Auburn's blessed to be having a lot returning. Of course, other fan bases will start to get jealous and will criticize that the average age for an offensive lineman at Auburn is 24 and complain and whine and moan about how old they are, right? Like what a weird flat. I mean, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. It'll happen with football. Well, they should be winning. Their offensive line averages 24 years of age. I mean, that's the goal.
Okay, who cares?
That's the goal. Retain people. Let them play 3 or 4 years. When San Diego State knocked Alabama out of the Sweet 16 a couple years ago, all the national pundits said it's because they had 5 seats. Everyone was praising it. It happens to Auburn, and it gets criticized. Wait for the offensive tackle. When Auburn's offensive line eats this year and goes off, you're going to hear it.
Hey, whatever.
Exactly.
They can say whatever they want.
But
Auburn's winning, who cares?
So my original point before I went off the Chattanooga choo-choo train rail there was
nice.
Auburn's going to lose a lot of offensive tackles. And so in 2025, so they're going to have to get a lot. And this is the way to do it. Bring in a lot of numbers, quantity, quality, let's go. And, of course, you still got the portal to backfill as well.
Yeah, and I do think they'll get tackles. But, it is interesting. Like, there is a chance that they don't lose Xavier Chaplin. Like, if he's not NFL good, or maybe Auburn's NIL can compete with, a second or third day draft pick, like that'll be interesting. But yeah, you're right. I mean, after this season, Seth Wilford will still have eligibility. Tyler Johnson, and it kind of feels like it'll be his turn to really get ready and go.
You think Connor Lew goes to the NFL after next year?
I do. If he doesn't, though, oh my goodness, what a great situation. But then I think you'll also have after the season, Favor Edwin. He was kind of recruited as a raw prospect next year in the 2026 season.
DeAndre Carter better be playing a lot by then.
Yeah, I think he'll be more of a guard than a tackle, but I think he's good enough to be developed either way. We'll see how they do that. And then Broderick Scholl, is a guy I'm super, super high on. He'll probably be a redshirt freshman. Will he be ready? So they'll have options. But they'll need to backfill. No question about it when it comes to the recruiting. So those four names: Darius Gray, Dominic Harris, Wilson Zaire, and Dalton Toothman. Some names to watch when it comes to recruiting the offensive line. Auburn hosts Georgia tomorrow in Neville Arena. Auburn beat the Bulldogs in Athens. There was some drama there. I'm expecting a different flow of the game tomorrow. Darrell, we'll talk about that in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel's America's #1 sportsbook. Darrell, can you imagine wagering anywhere other than with our friends at FanDuel?
Absolutely not, especially with the incentives that they give you, right? They give you a little bit of a carrot. They dangle that for you. Yeah.
If your first $5 bet hits, you get $150 in bonus bets. You got to love it. Auburn right now, you can take them at plus 330 to win the NCAA championship. Absolutely insane. You also can bet on them at minus 1050 to win the SEC regular season. So they definitely think Auburn is going to win the SEC. And I do too. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA and the Locked On Podcast Network. The Auburn Tigers take on the Georgia Bulldogs in Neville Arena. And this is a game, Darrell, where there was some drama earlier in the season in Athens, a game that just would not end. Every time there kept, being seconds added to the clock and extra possessions, and Georgia had multiple opportunities to win that game, and it just didn't happen. I think tomorrow's game will be more lopsided in Auburn's favor, especially with them not playing super hot against Arkansas earlier this week. I like the Tigers, and I think I like them by around double digits. I think Auburn walks away with this one.
That game in Athens was just torture because, Auburn was up double digits with under 2 minutes to go and just some crazy things. And if I can remember correctly, Georgia had a 3 from the corner in the air to either win it or tie it and didn't. And Auburn hung on and won and just did not play particularly well down the stretch. That was a game, by the way, that they played without Janai Broome.
Good point. Great point.
So you got to go back in and add 18 and 12 at home, and that's a big difference. So your double digit is – and I remember, other people stepped up, but still. See, what's happening now is that when Broome was out, Chaney Johnson was getting some points to backfill that. Now Broome's playing and Chaney Johnson's still getting his points. And that was the point that we made about could this be a blessing in disguise?
That's what we hoped.
Yeah.
We hoped.
And it's come to fruition. It has.
Dylan too. Dylan's had where his role is a little more offensive than maybe we would have thought going into it. So everybody has stepped up at different points this year.
If you continue to get Broome's 18, 19 a night, and then Chaney Johnson, who was coming off the bench, is now giving you 14, that's great production. So especially out of the 4 positions. So Broome didn't play. I think Auburn will not have 2 performances in a row where they look a little bit uninspired. I'm not saying the effort wasn't there Wednesday night or they sleepwalked, but it was just not as intense. It was a little uninspiring, their performance. And I'll say that. I'll say that they sleepwalked. I think the thing that was the most frustrating about that game was, and this will not happen against Georgia, is that Auburn continued in the second half time again to shoot threes when the inside game was there. And you can't do that against a good team. You can't give away possessions, give away points. I think whatever Georgia will give Auburn Saturday that's there for the taking tomorrow, Auburn will capitalize on, and I expect them to play a lot better. And then with Broome back in the lineup, has a potential to, like you said, be a double-digit victory.
Yeah. So you don't think that's too aggressive to say that Auburn wins by 10?
No, I don't. I think that they'll play better than they did in Athens. They'll have Broome, and I think they'll play better than they did Wednesday night.
Yeah.
And I think Arkansas is better than Georgia. They have similar SEC records. I think they're both 4-9.
I think I agree with you there.
But I like Arkansas's talent better than Georgia's. I mean, Georgia's got the Asa Sewell kid or Newell kid or whatever who's really good, but and they got Blue Kane, who I think Auburn can neutralize him. Denver Jones can neutralize him.
Yeah, put him in a straitjacket.
Exactly. So, yeah, I like Arkansas's roster a little bit better, and so I think Auburn will this game will be a little less nerve-wracking than what happened Wednesday night.
So I think Auburn has a prime opportunity to solidify their footing as the clear number one SEC team from a standings standpoint. Tennessee plays at Texas A&M, so that's a 6 versus 7 in the country matchup. You have Mississippi State, a ranked team, playing on the road against an unranked Oklahoma team. I think State wins, but something interesting could happen there. You've got a ranked Ole Miss team on the road at Vandy, which we've seen Vandy be tricky so far this season. I'm also not sure if Ole Miss should be ranked at this point. That's just kind of where I'm at. I hope they keep it though for one more game at least, so Auburn gets another ranked win. But then Auburn's at home, and then number 2 Florida is at LSU. I think LSU stinks, but like weirder things have happened in this conference this year, so like I think that's interesting. And then you have a ranked Missouri team that's on cloud 9 at Arkansas. And then the other ranked team that's on the road is Kentucky at Alabama. And I think, as long as one of those teams win, I think it benefits Auburn. So you've got all of these ranked teams on the road, and then Auburn's at home tomorrow. And I think that's an opportunity for maybe some potential separation.
This is so deja vu. You could have just played the tape back.
The Florida weekend?
The Florida. I mean, you literally verbatim said exactly.
No.
You started naming the ranked teams that were on the road.
You should have stopped
bam,
me.
Bam. You went right down the list, and then you said, I called it Separation Saturday like an idiot. No, I'm not answering that question.
Fair enough.
All those teams are winning, and all those teams are keeping pace with Auburn. That's how it's going to happen. Except Tennessee and A&M is an elimination game because one of them has to lose.
And Kentucky and Alabama because one of them has to lose.
Yeah, it's one of them. But other than that, no. Ranked teams going on the road, they're all winning, and they're all staying. They're all staying.
You're
right.
What a crazy thought. What a crazy thought.
Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah,
you're right. And of course, Auburn needs to beat Georgia.
Exactly.
Auburn definitely needs to beat Georgia. What do you think the score is? Let us know down below if you're watching on YouTube, and if you're on audio, hit us up on social media or over at thebarnauburn.com. All right, a conversation coming up with Spencer McLaughlin. He asked kind of the national perspective, which I thought was interesting. He reached out to me. He's like, hey, I want to have you on for a segment to talk about Eric Singleton. I thought that was very interesting. So that's coming up. Before we get to that, Darrell, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
Follow me on X, DAP6410. It was jumping last Wednesday night. Instagram, Darrell Dapp. And then I'm with you twice a week, Wednesday, Fridays. And then obviously tomorrow night, we will go live right after the Georgia game.
Yes, absolutely. All right, our conversation with Spencer McLaughlin. That's next.
Auburn's most important transfer is not exactly just Jackson Arnold. Zac Blackerby, Locked On Auburn, joining me here to discuss. Here's why I think it's Eric Singleton, Zach, who was one of the top wide receivers of the portal that moved. He comes over from Georgia Tech. Keandre Lambert-Smith last year had over 900 yards receiving on 50 catches, and that wasn't an offense that didn't do a whole heck of a lot. Arnold just had a season in which everything around him was a mess, and it went horribly. He got benched, then he returned. It wasn't any good. So the premise of him succeeding at Auburn, to me, is predicated on he needs to have an incredibly strong support system around him, and one guy in Cam Coleman can only do so much as great as he is.
Yeah. Certainly get the argument for sure. And if Jackson Arnold does pop, like you said, Eric Singleton probably has a massive part to do with it. I love that you brought up KLS, Keandre Lambert-Smith, because to me, he was one of the surprises last year. Penn State was kind of like, okay, good. Glad you're leaving. Auburn was super stoked to have a guy like KLS come in. And I had decent expectations, but I think he exceeded all of them. And some of that had to do with all the attention being on, star freshman last year, Cam Coleman. And KLS was a leader in that room. What's interesting is Singleton, the assumed KLS replacement, very different type players. Eric Singleton is much faster, I think much more athletic and much more dynamic and more versatile. He played slot and outside receiver at Georgia Tech, so we'll see how he's used at Auburn. That, KLS was your outside guy. He was a possession guy. So I'm excited to see how Singleton replaces Keandre Lambert-Smith in this Hugh Freeze offense.
If he's able to have the year that he's capable of, that you and I think he's capable of, the 24/7, and their rankings think that he's capable of producing, is this one of the best wide receiver tandems in the SEC? Because
yes,
there's plenty of turnover. You look at Tennessee's receiving core was great last year. They're having a bunch of guys leave. Ryan Williams never had a truly established number 2. I didn't think for Alabama a whole heck of a lot last year. Like, if these two guys are good and it goes how Auburn wants, Zach, I think they could both be over 1,000 yards.
Wow. Yeah. Then, what does that do as far as wins and losses? We'll certainly have to see. I don't know if it's been a long time since Auburn had a 1,000-yard receiver. I don't know if they all of a sudden jump from 0 to 2. A man can dream, and I'm there with you. Something you said a second ago, in an offense that didn't do a whole lot when you talk about what KLS did last year. Auburn's offense was productive. They just didn't score points, Spencer. They were pretty.
Do you see the oxymoron there? Do you see how? I get what you're saying.
But you cited yards, right? And this was an offense that was able to get yards. They just turned it over a lot, especially in the first half of the season. And then in key plays, they didn't answer the call. And so can Eric Singleton help Jackson Arnold do what KLS and Peyton Thorne couldn't do consistently? And I think some of that is talent. Sure, there's a lot of questions about the quarterback role in Hugh Freeze's offense, but I think a lot of this is scheme as well, Spencer. I mean, when you look at the tandem of Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton, and let's don't forget about Malcolm Simmons, who is a very talented true freshman receiver a year ago who got in late, and he got better as the season went on. I think he has the chance to be a really, really solid number 3, one of the better number 3 receivers in the SEC. And then they went out and got, a Horatio Fields, who I don't think is a scrub by any means from Wake Forest. And then, former 5-star receiver Perry Thompson, which they flipped from Bama. Can he take that step forward too? So they've got a great room. They've got a great wide receiver on paper, one of the best wide receiver rooms that Auburn's had in a very long time, if ever.
I thought last year the narrative around KLS was kind of odd because I liked him at Penn State.
I did too. Sure.
And you're right that it didn't feel like Penn State was making a huge push to keep him around. They were kind of like, if you want to go, then go. We're not going to, do anything. And then what was their biggest shortcoming? Oh, that's right, the wide receiver position. They literally, in the biggest games, could not consistently complete passes on the outside. Big Ten championship game, interception down the sideline. Now, of course, it was better for them to lose that game because that's how college football works nowadays. But they're trying to get the ball to a wide receiver, intercepted. And then they're trying to get the ball to a wide receiver against Notre Dame in the semifinal, intercepted. And I just really liked what KLS brought to that Auburn offense. And
sure,
I hear you on the differences between him and Singleton. I wonder if it doesn't open things up for Cam Coleman in a respect, because Singleton is a burner. He's a kind of Tyreek Hill style, go over the top and just run straight by you. Does that open up the middle of the field for Cam Coleman for him to have an even bigger year?
It certainly could. It certainly could. And we'll see exactly what kind of roles that does open up for a lot of these guys. I think it's more than just Cam Coleman when you talk about this Auburn receiving core. So it does go back to Jackson Arnold, though, and all of this. There's such a large contingency that's putting Auburn's shortcomings last year on quarterback play. I think that had some to do with it. I think a lot of it was scheme and play calling. And so we got to see how Auburn addresses all of that. But, I mean, you said at the top of the segment here, Jackson Arnold's situation in Oklahoma was terrible. And everybody's writing him off. Horrible. And this is the same guy that last offseason, I mean, we saw it at SEC Media Days, people were hyping up Oklahoma. And I remember asking you and asking several people, like, they're replacing an entire offensive line, and they have questions about the receiving core. I agree that Jackson Arnold's talented. And now we fast forward a year later, and all of a sudden now everybody's writing Jackson Arnold off, despite him being in a significantly better situation, even if you include the offensive line. And I know, and I agree with you that Eric Singleton is a super crucial transfer portal addition. If you take out John Mateer, I mean, he was the best, he's the highest rated player in the portal until John Mateer entered the portal. But another guy that I think impacts Jackson Arnold just as much is Xavier Chaplin, who's the number one offensive tackle in the portal from Virginia Tech. I mean, I think he has a sizable impact on this offense as well. So Jackson Arnold should be in a much different and much better situation than what we saw with him a year ago.
I said Hugh Freeze needs 7 wins to keep himself either off the hot seat or employed by Auburn University this year. Do you agree?
I mean, we all know that there's variables that go into this. I do think there's a world where he could go 6-6 and keep his job, but I think 7-5 is, yeah, definitely. Yeah,
I just don't know that you could make. I agree with the variables point. If the injuries flood in, if they're on a third string quarterback by week 5 because guys keep getting hurt, if 3 offensive linemen go down in the first week, you can give some context to it.
Well, let's be even more realistic. Let's say they trip up on their road games and they lose to Georgia and Bama at home, and they lose a game they're not supposed to. That put them at 6-6. But what if they continue the recruiting trend and somehow in a 6-6, a world where they go 6-6, they hold on to their roster and they have another top 6 or 7 recruiting class? And if he's able to hold it all together, I don't think you can move on from him in that situation. And once again, we're talking worst case scenario.
Yeah. It would certainly be tough because I think the back half of Auburn's schedule is incredibly favorable.
Oh, there's a 4-game stretch there
where they should go at least 3-1.
I think so.
And I don't think they go winless the rest of the year. I think they're going to be.
And we kind of did this last year too, where it's like the schedule makes sense. But Missouri, I don't think they have a stretch where after Georgia, it's Missouri at home, at Arkansas, Kentucky at home, at Vandy.
Yeah, that's the stretch.
And then versus Mercer. Like, they should go 4-1 in that stretch.
Yeah. I think if they do, Freeze is likely safe because that means they're competent enough to, win in that 7-win range. The question will just be, is there anything that excites Auburn fans going into 2026, or will it just be, you don't fire him after that season with the way he's recruiting, or is it just going to be, or maybe they beat Alabama and Auburn is electrified into, hey, Hugh Freeze is the greatest coach in the history of college football, or something along those lines.
Yeah, and I think some of it depends too on, can you steal one at Oklahoma or at Texas A&M? Do you beat Baylor on the road? And I think if you go 2-3 in those first 3 road games at Baylor, at OU, and at Texas A&M, like, I do think Auburn's fine.
Yeah, I think they can be, but if they go 5-7, Hugh Freeze, I think will.
Yeah, and once again, we had this conversation when they started the season last year. It's like, okay, they should be 4-0 when they host Oklahoma.
Yep.
And they lost to Cal and Arkansas. So
it was not.
You got to play the games. Got to play the games. Great stuff with Spencer. Be sure to go check out his show, Locked On College Football. I think he does an outstanding job. Thank you so much to Spencer. Thank you so much to Darrell, of course. And come hang out with Darrell and me after the Auburn basketball game against Georgia. We go live after every Auburn basketball game, and it's always a blast to have you. Please like the video. Please subscribe. And if you're listening on audio, please leave a review and subscribe there as well. Helps the show out a ton. We'll see you next time. This has been Locked On Auburn.